Evening, everybody. As it says there, that's me, Robert Flute. So I work for the National Ambulance Resilience Unit. First thing I want to say, Chatham House rules, please. Although it says that, and they're paying me tonight to do this, I would like to say that some of these, they are my personal views. And some of the things we'll talk about, yes, I will be giving Robert Flute, not on behalf of NARU. So is that understood? So please don't quote me, NARU says this, please. I don't want that in the... whatever tomorrow. So a little bit of background about myself. A music teacher, you have to be with the name Flute, don't you? Bassoonist by trade and singer. Look me up on Twitter, I think it tells you everything. So EPR advisor, having been a paramedic, attended a scene of an incident which you probably all remember in 2002, a Class 365, I am a train fan, sort of collided with Potters Bar Station. So that was my real introduction to the world of EP as a tactical commander at the time. I went off and did a master's and then sort of did health generally, so acute, primary and mental health, looking after emergency preparedness, and then came back to the ambulance service where I was head of resilience for the finest counties, of course, and I will mention Norfolk at least twice tonight. Anybody from Nottingham? Who's from Nottinghamshire here? So you've got it in already within about 30 seconds. Absolutely, good. But that's one anyway, right? And I'll mention railways in a minute. That's two. So yeah, and then I was seconded to NARU nearly 2 years ago. And I'm based at the National Seaborne Centre. Notice I didn't say Police National Seaborne Centre. It is ours. It belongs to all of us. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So that's me. I always start my presentations off with this slide. Does anybody know where that is? It isn't. He's going to be a pain tonight. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Yarlswood, absolutely, yes. Why am I showing that? That probably, are you all I've looked at your sort of your backgrounds, you're all resiliency people. That door sums up us, doesn't it? Or to misquote Kipling, when all around you are losing their heads and we keep ours, we've probably misunderstood the seriousness of the situation, but yeah, that's us. That everything else, complete chaos. We are the rock that stands up, unlike the rest of the building, which didn't have sprinklers. Yes, so probably that sums it up. So the objectives, what I was asked to look at really, and I've changed it slightly, having researched this. I promise it won't be death by PowerPoint. I won't be reading every blooming slide. I've looked at 7/7 and how the terrorists did that, and how they've evolved. The terrorist attack has evolved, and then with the Paris incident, and then again, obviously, what's subsequently happened in Brussels. Some of the stuff is still, I can't actually comment too much about the medical treatment in terms of yes and no, but certainly in terms of command and control, what we need to do. So yes, safety to responders is paramount, isn't it? And I've got my colleagues in the military here. That is absolutely essential, you going into those environments as well. JESIP, as I've sort of trying to say, we shouldn't be talking about JESIP. JESIP should be embedded amongst everybody and not just the emergency services. Big mistake calling it the Joint Emergency Services. It's all of us. I once heard somebody, very senior police officer, say, oh, we need to make this a JESIP incident. What do you think? Is that right? No, we should, all incidents are JESIP multi-agency. We'll discuss that later. And please, I'd like two-way things. It's not going to be me, I do like talking, as you can probably tell, but I do want some interaction from the audience, even from Nottinghamshire. And finally, it's lovely to see people that are disguised. By the way, I can see you, so you're not that well disguised for the Ministry of Defence. Wonderful. So the work that we're doing with our colleagues from the MOD in the ambulance service, I have to talk that it's the ambulance service, but certainly it's been closed doors previously. Now it's what we can do, and you rely on us and we rely on you. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that as well. I'll have to pixelate some of the faces there on that one, okay? Yes, indeed. I think they will be available on the website afterwards, including all the Norfolk references and trains. I have to plug my employer, don't I? So NARU is the National Ambulance Resilience Unit. So we're based at two locations, Winterbourne, Gunner, with Her Majesty's Armed Services. It's our training wing. And secondly, where I am at the National Seaborne Centre. All of our documentation has been aligned to JESIP. So we're trying to encourage, yes, we're commissioned by NHS England, but our remit is, well, I'm very proud that those documents are also across the UK as well. So if you haven't seen some of those, speak to me afterwards and I'll make sure that we can send you some copies of those. Okay, but certainly the command and control guidance worked very closely with our colleagues in police and fire to get that right, so that we're using the same language. The ambulance service had never had that. It was sort of turn up, and I'll talk about what it used to be like in a minute. That's what we're governed on. I'm not going to bore you. I think we all know about the CCA to death now. Obviously, working for health, that's my Bible. It's the NHS guidance. Guidance second only, of course, to legislation, and that keeps us in the job as well. And those other bits that I've mentioned, which I happen to be the author of. Did I mention that? So I have to mention that. As I said, we work closely with all those people. Particularly, I'm very proud I work in a shared office with police officers and fire officers. So it's an NPCC, CFOA. There we are. I'm trying not to do TLAs. There we are. All look at that lot in a sentence, but they're all at the bottom there. And it is a true multi-agency centre. Just wanted to reiterate, there's a couple of things. Yes, you know about this. We, the ambulance service, do lead the primary NHS response on scene of an incident. So whatever anybody else comes on scene on behalf of the NHS, it's the ambulance service's responsibility. And all casualties are the NHS's responsibility. Yes, in a mass casualty situation, for mass decontamination, the fire and rescue service will do that, but on our behalf. And it will be, come the day of judgment, it will be the senior ambulance officer that would say, well, what process have you put in place for decontamination? Just want to reiterate that. It is an NHS responsibility on that. Risks and emergencies, that's really important. I think the police and fire have a duty of care to staff. We have a legal duty of care to our staff, and who else? Patients. That's our biggest thing. So that legal duty of care to patients is really important. And I think that's where we failed on 7/7. And I'm not going to criticise the London Ambulance Service, who did an extremely good job, but we have moved on since then. So that's why I want to do that little bit retrospectively and what we have learned from that. But I think we did fail from not putting definitive patient care in at the time, but I'll talk about what we've done since then. And God forbid, if something like that would happen again. We'd have no local responsibility. That's down to NHS trusts locally, but we're now creating national service specifications for people. So HART throughout the country, that's the hazardous air response teams, will be the same no matter north, south, east or west. Scotland call it SORT, but it's the same. And in Wales, very similar arrangements. So you know your response, and I'm particularly looking at my military colleagues here, you know if you call for us, you're going to get the standard response anywhere across the UK, which is important. That's the challenge we do have. Any comments on that? Is that going to change? Can you see these and these merging together? I think that probably is happening. And I think, again, Robert Flute speaking, I think the change from DCLG managing the fire and rescue services to it coming under the Home Office is a fantastic opportunity. One, to save money, let's be honest, but two, to stop duplicity of equipment and skills. So who needs to be looking after the DIM equipment? Is it police or is it fire? Yeah, I think I've got my own opinion on that, but there's certainly ways that we can share that kit. And as the public thinks that we're the joint emergency services, well, this is going to actually make it happen. Two departments to deal with, Department of Health for us and the Home Office for Fire and Rescue and the police. So it can only strengthen things. 10 ambulance service, there is another one, which is the finest one, that's the Isle of Wight. I'd like to mention that. I do holiday every year, have a wonderful little railway there. There's another one for you. But it works. NHS Isle of Wight, primary, acute, ambulance, 111, GP out of hours, all in one building. It works. Is it a system we should be looking at? That's another talk. So we have subject matter experts looking at that policy, which I've already said really. So, and the main thing is marauding terrorist firearms, which I'm going to go into. The hazardous air response team, mass casualties. They're our three main areas that NARA is looking at across I will say the UK. You've probably all seen that, yes? Probably sick of Jessup, but that really is why I'm going to talk now. It's great they're actually wearing the correct tabard. And I will talk about tabards and yes and no's to that in a minute, but And there's what we call spin the wheel, which I'm told off for saying it when I go to JESIP meetings. But we all do it, don't we? It is the joint decision model, which you all probably all know about. I'm going to take you back, though, to the old picture, the joint decision model. Let's put it into English. Yes, it does work. So gather information intelligence. Well, that was you knew the person. And in EP, if you don't know them, you've got a phone number or somebody else that's going to know that person. Yeah, am I right? The second one, assess threat and risk, develop a working strategy. Right. In English, that was you wrote something down on the back of a fag packet. Third bit, consider policies and procedures. Oh, heck. We haven't got a policy. We better write one now. Or a procedure. Option, yes, no, or run. And finally, take actions and review. Well, that tended to happen in the crew room, and I'll talk about reflective practice right at the end of the talk as well. So I think we've come on a long way from that. The JDM works in practice. I've seen it used around car bonnets, around a police car with the 3 services. Fantastic. Yeah, so it is working. Is it fully embedded at all levels in your services? No, and that's the issue. We shouldn't be talking about JESIP, we should be just talking about multi-agency working. And when we do, that's when we've achieved it. Just to say, we do have to react very quickly to changes of things, such as MTFA. So there's brand new procedures came out, learnt what had happened in some of the attacks that have taken place. So there's a brand new one came out in January. Other things that we got involved in, of course, is Ebola. And the other one on the right, which is the elephant in the room, is IOR, Initial Operational Response to a CBRN Incident. Again, I'm probably teaching just like eggs, and not knowing the audience fully, but that's not fully embedded across the emergency services. Yes, we've been audited on it, but if you ask the average Bobby, the average paramedic, and the average firefighter, what does IOR mean? You'd get a blank look. What we really need to be concentrating on with that one is, this looks dodgy, there's some people coughing, get them to take their clothes off, keep a distance, chuck something at them, tell them why you're doing this, and call for backup. That is simply, and I think we may have gone into a little bit too much detail, but that's the basics, and communicating with people. How many of you get really peed off if I love trains, but if you don't, if the train stops and there's no information? That's when we start getting annoyed and panicking. Your eyes are burning or whatever, that you need information. You've got some paramedics standing there in front of you not doing anything. Communication's going to help. If they're starting to tell you what to do, that's help. And you know the cavalry's on its way. Yes. Yes. So, yeah. Certainly the middle one is wider. Yeah, absolutely. And certainly the CBRM one, which we're doing, and again, we'll have a section on for local authorities. Yeah. And obviously we tie with you chaps and chapesses on that, definitely. So, training for this. Yeah, and it's great to see that was taken at Brighton last week. It is truly multi-agency for this. So, but again, look at the pips and that on their shoulders. Are they the right people that are doing this IOR? I said I might get a bit controversial, and the answer is no. We can convince these people it works. It's those on the ground when you go to a scene of somebody running eyes, etc. That's what we need to be concentrating on. So a long way to go, but I think we're getting it at that level, yes, and we now need to embed it fully down. I've mentioned MTFA. Is everybody clear about that? So there's the definition of an MTFA, a marauding terrorist firearms incident. So unfortunately, what we've seen too much of recently, simultaneous automatic weapons, improvised explosives, and are likely to be in crowded places such as Norwich City Football Club. Any news on the score yet? Okay, thank you. IEDs, better talk about that as well. So improvised devices, again, you can read what it says there. You can find these things on the internet quite easily. There's various people I could tell you to go, so I wouldn't, because then you'll be monitored by MI5. But quite openly available. And if we speak to some of your guys, it's quite interesting of how easily it is to make. And then, of course, personal-borne explosive devices, which, again, I'm going to go into suicide bombers. And the final one, which actually was picked up by a paramedic, if you remember the Tiger bombings. The bomb that was found in a car actually had been doctored, thank goodness, and it wouldn't have gone off because of certain people fiddling around with a certain website, luckily. But it was found by an off-duty paramedic who thought, there's a car there, that shouldn't be there, it looks odd. And that's what we should. That's the other big thing we need to be training everybody. And I'm not just talking about the emergency services. This is a wider thing about the great British public. If in doubt, call it in. And they did. That would have been the rendezvous point for the emergency services, and carnage would have ensued. Yes, please. Yes. Great. Thank you very much. Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah. Okay, thank you. See, excellent. Right, I'd like to show you, I think you probably all know that. One of my aims is, by the way, to do all stations in a day, by the way. We'll try and do that one day. Take you back to 7/7. The first few minutes, absolute chaos. I think this is as it came in, and I got these timings from my colleagues in the London Ambulance Service. Actually, all the bombs were timed at 8:50. Or were they? What was the fundamental mistake the terrorists made on that day? They did. Well, who said that? They didn't synchronise their watches exactly. So there was a difference in terms of that. So that's at 8:50. Now, actually, it took 13 minutes. 13 minutes for London Ambulance Service to be notified of all of those incidents. Catastrophic failure, you could say, in terms of getting response to that incident. I think the first, in those days it was Sad Chalet, now through Jessip it's methane. That methane report didn't get there for 14 minutes. So we have learned from that now. If you look at previous, a lot more recent incidents, we've certainly learned from that. Russell Square, the worst. Why was that worse? I mean, it probably shows you on my slide here, but why was that the worst, where 27 people died? Yeah, it's in the tunnel. So that's exactly what the terrorists hoped would be happening with the other two as well. That if it's in a tunnel, the explosive, of course, it has nowhere to go, so therefore the impact is greater. But of course, the iconic image, which I'll come on to in a minute, have a look at that picture as well there. Anything that you see from that image there? Is that Jessip at work? What do you think to that picture? Any comments? Absolutely right. Here you go. London Ambulance Service and a doctor. Yep, okay, having a nice little chat here. Police and the squeaky beakies, as I would call it there. Pixelated faces, really, yeah. And then you've got fire and rescue. Where are they? They're here. Yeah. Is there any joint command going on there at that operational level? No. I think that picture highlights it. Somebody showed me this as a picture as a Jessip at work, and you look at it, it's not, is it? Absolutely not. Yep. Okay. Again, nobody's wearing, well, there are a couple of tabards, but they're all the same. So again, if you're trying to find the person in charge, you wouldn't know, would you? So again, I think we've moved on from there. Certainly, yeah, thank you. Any other points on that? Anybody from fire service before I say my next comment? Hello, my friend. You always do that. You forget we have to get out. And I think Jessip's helping on that now, because methane entry and exit, important. We're best friends, really. That was the carnage in that carriage that was in the tunnel, the difference between the explosion there. But it's ironic that the iconic image of, and I'll go to the next slide, of the London bombings is not the tubes, it's that bus. Now we will really never know why he, why he actually got off that tube, and it detonated. Was it faulty? Did somebody else do it? I'm not quite sure on that, but we'll never know. But that actually, an impact. That was the one that the world got. It's a red London bus. And, of course, 14 people were killed on that bus. So if we look at London, I think, actually, we were extremely lucky for a number of factors. 52 fatalities, and the bombers themselves as well. The most there, as I said, 24 in that deep tunnel. These, because they're subsurface, it was allowed to dissipate. 14 from that bus, 700 treated. The death toll was not higher. Any reason? You probably researched this. Why was the death toll not higher? Any ideas? Partly, my friend, yeah. It's also, if you can see on this one, this is the BMA building here. So the BMA had got a conference on, so we've got some experts, trauma specialists there. It couldn't have worked out better for us as the responders to assist with that particular incident. So that helped absolutely no end. As I said, a conference was occurring there. I'm showing that. Why am I showing that picture? Yeah, absolutely. In 2005, the radio system didn't work. Yeah, absolutely. There were catastrophic failures. I think that Her Majesty's Coroner mentioned in certain bits. We've come on a long way on that airwave, and whatever happens to airwave, and it's coming in next year, and we haven't seen it yet, but that will helps no end. I've put about mobile phones there because no matter what we say, they will be used in a major incident. And of course, if I then look at the next slide, which of course is Paris, how was that coordinated? Literally by mobile phone. Somebody's watching us doing those attacks. 7 gunmen and suicide bombers, and of course killed 129 people in Paris. Again, we're not quite sure if you look at this. So, looking back at London, yes, they'd sort of planned it, but this takes it to a whole new level. This was a coordinated attack. So, as you know, there was a game playing on at the Stade de France. 3 explosions there. One in a very, very thinly. We're not quite sure whether that went off accidentally. It probably was more likely to be remotely detonated, but it was strange. It only killed 1 person, so minimum effect. The next team, of course, down here, 15, and the biggest, of course, in the Bataclan, 89. But a real concerted effort and the use of mobile phone technology. Oh, no, I can't move that. Why is that not working? That's it. So 920 blew himself up, so causing some issues at the Stade de France. The second team around about 940. And the final suicide bomber at 941 on the boulevard down here. Luckily, only 1 person injured. If we look at Brussels. So, first explosion. As we know, if you go to any airport, of course, the finest airport being Norwich. There's a clue again. Thank you. The terrorists, and everybody knows where the queue is, isn't it? So you know there's a tightly, densely packed area of people that are going to be there. So where to do it? Outside Starbucks. And you can see there, so the first 2 explosions, and then, of course, the attack on the third explosion on the metro system. Chaos ensuing there. Very similar, you could think that was 7/7. So what do we have to train our people to think about when approaching a scene like that? What are the things? What's the obvious things that we should be doing? Absolutely. So the possibility of secondaries. What else? Absolutely. Yeah, precisely. Do we still have a secondary device? Secondary further attackers? Are they? In this case, some of those were still alive. We had the chap with the hat on, disappeared, still carrying a device. Yeah. Also things that may look out of ordinary, so exactly not parking vehicles by bins and things, and we now no longer use rendezvous points. We'll have a dynamic rendezvous point. Rather than putting all our eggs in one basket, and that's for police, fire and ambulance, we will assemble in different locations rather than all in one place. Getting our staff to do that is the key thing. Thinking outside the box. Hello, Guy. You're okay. Cries of help, what could they mean? Well, it could be, again, forcing people to go in and then, of course, actually becoming casualties themselves. So again, that's something else we've got to learn from. So, joint operating procedures completely changed in January. So looking at identification, mobilisation, scene assessment, and this is a tri-service thing. But when I say that, just because one service isn't there, it won't stop us going forward. There needs to be a dynamic risk assessment, and I'll come on to risk assessment in a bit more. But that really is important. We can't stop because one of the parties not there. Casualty management, and obviously looking for other things such as fire hazards, and obviously the other thing about debris, etc. The biggest thing is actually getting communication between everybody, so that as soon as possible, ensuring that the control rooms know this is happening. So that whole JESIP procedure, not just for the emergency responders, but for the control rooms. So the control rooms contact each other. We'll also making sure that the military involved as well are informed. That will be a very large priority and high priority. What do our people do? Well, this is what has changed since 7/7. So that ambulance clinicians can provide that clinical care. Now, again, I don't want to say, I'm going to say they're going to do a fantastic job within that warm zone. If you look at Paris, and we're still looking at the results from Brussels, the French have a different way of dealing with it. The French would rather patch up on scene and do maximum treatment on scene, whereas in Brussels, it's patch up and get the hell out of there. Now, interestingly, our job would be pretty similar to that. It's, at the moment, our procedure is life-saving treatment and get the hell out of there. We need to look at those results over the next few months, coming months, and I know there's trauma conferences looking at that. So that'll be interesting to see the results on that. Again, you can see triage, and I'll come on to the criticism that came from 7/7 and what we've done in a minute. We're looking at triage, but not in pre-planned operations, and of course, active shooter. So again, that triage can be done. It's the same system as we always use. That's the flow chart that we've got in the new ops. And you can see we're not that brave in the ambulance service. That's all blue, and we'll leave that, absolutely, in the hot zone. I like the tepid zone here, so that's where we will have those multi-agency teams. So, yes, FAR will be looking at sort of sorting out the hazards, and we'll be there making sure that those casualties may be evacuated to a casualty clearing point or collection point, and then removed from there to further definitive care. The other elephant in the room, where is this going to be, the TCG? Always like to mention that one. It could be. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. You certainly have in your patch. Absolutely. Yeah. So TCG, again. Yeah. It can be. Absolutely. I agree, and I think that's the point. I think it is a dynamic decision given, isn't it? That's the point. And on my next slide, really, I'll look at that, because if you do, I want you to sort of investigate where you'd think how you'd manage the incident when we come back to a Paris one. All of this stuff, yes, is going on. We've got kit that can be mobilised, which is mass casualty equipment. Again, if I showed you where they were, I'd have to shoot you, but they're strategically located around the country in places where you'd expect them to be. So trauma dressings, pain relief, and oxygen. But the biggest thing they carry are these things. This is what we learned from 7/7. And again, if you look at Paris's similar injuries with high velocity weapons, you're going to die from what? Loss of blood. Yeah? So plugging a leak is the best thing. Plug that leak and then evacuation. That's what was missing on 7/7. So basic first aid wasn't done. And then advanced care wasn't done because at the time, paramedics weren't allowed to go into it. Firefighters are firefighters. Paramedics weren't allowed to go into that hazardous zone. So that's what's changed. Putting definitive care, and not just paramedics, so advanced care practitioners and doctors down there. But this is what the members of the public can do as well. So self-help is absolutely as important. Throw a dressing at somebody, shove that on there, stick their arm up in the air, that's going to help. And that will save lives. So we have come on no end. They're located right across the UK at mainline railway stations and all sorts of places. Rather like an army field dressing. Yes, they've got a sailboat out on it, but I'd still use one from the Second World War because it's going to do the job, isn't it? And it looks very attractive. Yes, I just would like to highlight there are other risks here, and we're concentrating on the terrorism things. There is always things, particularly where I live, and had to deal with as the strategic commander, flooding, so fluvial and coastal. And if we look at a classic incident, you probably recognise, of course, it is a train, a Class 91 versus a 66, fairly local to here. But that is what everybody thinks about a major incident, don't they? Yeah, they think there's a scene, a nice, tidy scene. And I don't mean that flippantly. People lost their lives there, but you can see what I mean. There's a strategic area which is well away at the police headquarters. You've got your TCG. There's a lovely casualty clearing station, which was the cowshed. Lovely setup. How would you manage that? Suggestions, please. I've got nods, which is good. It did. Yep. Yes. Yes. And again, because it was Paris, what services we got there? We've got a large number of hospitals in a confined space. So again, the medical services are okay. It's similar to Brussels as well. If this had happened in Norwich, and there we are, as another mention, the nearest apart from Norwich is another 26 miles away in Great Yarmouth, or 40 miles, well, nearly 50 miles away at Cambridge for our regional trauma centre. So different, yeah? Are you going to treat this as one incident? Bearing in mind what the terrorists did. Yes. Yeah. 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 Yes. Right, that's my point. I was going to highlight the point, but with flooding, in 2007, Carlisle Town Hall is the TCG, is flooded. Yeah, you've got certainly at Great Yarmouth, when we had the tidal surge in 2013, Great Yarmouth Police Station was a designated TCG for that. We had to move it because that was flooded. In fact, thank goodness the Ministry of Defence, you came and put some sandbags on our airwave radio and got us out of serious poo. Thank you, God bless you. But yeah, I think you've got to be dynamic on this. So there will be predetermined things, but we've got to be flexible on this. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not giving you answers on this. I'm just opening the questions up, okay? I'm going to show that slide because that's all our wonderful tabards that we've got. I sort of mentioned it slightly earlier. Any comments about that? And I've put the fire and the police one there again because they're going to be the people on scene in charge, having a similar thing to the ambulance service. Any comments? But I always stand next to this person because they're going to be safe as houses, aren't they, the safety officer? Never stand next to the decon officer because they could be glowing. But any issues about tabards? Anything that you're thinking when I'm showing you all these tabards? Yeah? Not that? What's the terrorist thinking? It's great, isn't it? It sort of says ready, aim, fire, doesn't it? Who's in charge? So consideration about use of, yes, and certainly in a hot zone you're not going to be wearing, you're going to be wearing, you saw the stuff that everybody's wearing, but do we want to make sure that, yes, identification is important, but are tabards now the right thing? Now I'm just going to throw that in the air. Not going to give you an answer because it was my idea to bring out tabards for the ambulance service to make sure that we all wore the same thing. Have we now moved on because of what's happening in the world? Comments, please. No? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yep. And similarly, we wouldn't do the same. Yeah. Okay. Any other points of view on that? Anybody else? Come on, Guy. You better want to say something. At a specific, okay, good. Yes. Yeah. Good. Okay. Lovely. As I said, I just wanted to light the touch paper there and get some debate on that. That's interesting. Thank you. I think this one, command and control. There it is. There is spinning the wheel. Anybody know what this is? It's CSCAT. If you're a MIMS or if you've done major incident management, that is CSCAT. Sorry, my wife found that picture. Command and control, safety. Yes. Communication, assessment, triage, treatment, and transport. CSCAT. Or there is Mr. CCAT. Yep. Absolutely essential. It sums up everything we're doing. So command and control has got to be in there. And if in doubt, call for backup. Safety, self-seen survivors. And the role, we didn't used to have a safety officer. The fire service have been brilliant at that. Absolutely, my friend, hat off to you on that one. We've got to take our own, start to look at that. And we're developing safety officer courses now, specifically for a role of that, but also everybody generic things that they can do. And I think Jessup started to look at that. There will be. But at the moment, there is no formal training for an ambulance scene safety officer. Overall, the ambulance incident commander would take that responsibility. But that's something we're developing, following quite a number of incidents. There will be a specific person that will be trained to do that, and a number of them. And I would suggest that can be done multi-agency as well. I think, and I'll come on to about NILOs in a minute, that's proved it can be multi-agency. So is safety officer another thing that can be done in a combined way? I'll come on to that. Yes. Yes. Yeah, and I think we are doing that now. I think the joint assessment of risk, the joint understanding of risk. By the time you boys and girls get there, we'll have identified that, and particularly in terms of threats. Contest mentions about, this was last year, I think 2 years ago, 75% of local responder organisations have exercised emergency preparedness plans. 77% have they been tested through multi-agency. If you go into it in more detail, what actually how have they exercised that? Was that a live exercise? Was this a tabletop, round the table, actually let's work through this? What's the validity of this? Are they really truly multi-agency exercises? And as I said, I'm speaking personally, I think sometimes we're a little bit over-ambitious. We need to look at one aspect of it, of an incident. That initial 5 minutes, fine, or further down the line when we know the baddies are dead, and that bit, or do we move into that recovery phase? Which, of course, in 7/7 was ongoing. The response phase was still going on, wasn't it, on the 24th of July when the second attempted attacks were going. That command and control was still in place. So here's some things we're looking at for consideration. That when we were writing this at the CBRN Centre, we thought actually this actually deals with any incident. Forget the word CBRN. So it's a tactical options and really everybody should be thinking about it. So confirm what's happening. Our staff, IOR, that's the initial operational response, as I've already mentioned. But the evacuation, cordons, threat mitigation, well, we can deal with those from our colleagues as well. Is it a permissive environment? So this is where actually tab odds or not, identification or not. Forward control point, rendezvous points, thinking about that as well. That's got to be a dynamic decision, as we've talked already. Okay, it says decontamination there, but we should also be thinking about the public and our responders, and I'm talking about that in terms of communication. What information do we need to get out there as quickly as possible? And I'm a great Twitter fan, so what can we do by social media? Do we want people coming to the scene? No, we don't. What do we want? But we can use Twitter to find out what's going on. And then, of course, casualty management. Absolutely important. So dealing with the suspects themselves as well, and obviously survivor management as well, which we tend to sort of pass over to the police. But of course, again, in 7/7, some of the intelligence was lost by people disappearing. So now it really is about collecting non-injured survivors, but because it's a scene of a crime, so making sure that that evidence is collated as well. So there's some considerations we're looking at, but certainly I think that's a lot better than with old 9 key tasks that we had. I want to mention specifically about the work that we're doing with the Ministry of Defence. I haven't had to pixelate any faces on this, but the TRF do a wonderful job, and we were always invited to the TRF induction days as the emergency services, and that was it. And then I was invited along to a particular exercise at is it Shrewsbury or Shrewsbury? How do I say it? That's the one. Thank you, Guy. That place. And okay, right. And I thought this is a golden opportunity. We've got our heart boys and girls that are trained in this stuff, and they're not being utilised. You're sending a team forward. They need a rescue plan. And so there had been an arrangement between Department of Health and the Ministry of Defence. There's an MOU about what we do as well. But this is now formalising it so that operations-wise, you will know, as I said, throughout the UK, that there's a swift transition between what you guys do, and we don't need to know about that, moving, as you can see, through the decon line here, from Ministry of Defence to NHS staff. We tested it. We went 12,000 miles to test it. We went to CAPEX, which is a multi-agency, multinational. So us, the Canadians, the Americans, the Australians and New Zealanders doing a similar thing. And they thought this was wonderful. They'd not seen this before. Military and health working together closely. And one of the commanders there said, these boys and girls have been working together, I take it, for a number of years. I said, 2 days. And that's the importance. TRF move around, they are on a rotation at heart teams. Now, because we've got a service specification, we know they've got a training day, so we can rotate them, that we know everybody's going to get to meet everybody. So they'll be working with those people, they'll know. There's an exercise in about a month's time a different team will be rotating, doing a very similar thing at Nestcliff. So just to highlight that. And again, on the show and tell, it's the military, from your perspective, didn't realise the capability that we have. So I think that's the other thing. Yes, we can show you what we can do and our limitations as well. There are only 6 people, and potentially we have backup to that, because if you mobilise a heart, it is a national response, so you'll be able to get further. But so it's a two-way process, and I can only see that developing further. My other thing, and it is a big thank you, I have to say that because there's lots of you in camouflage here. The role of the JRLO, certainly when I was head of resilience at East of England, is wonderful. One phone call to Richard saying that we've got an issue, and he said, well, what would you like me to do? And honestly, the issue with the airwave mast at Great Yarmouth was solved without lots of MACA forms and things like that. We had a detachment from Swanton Morley straight away, absolutely sorted. And that's what it's no those contacts are absolutely invaluable. Just to say what some of the heart capabilities is, they go up, they go down, they swim, and they go in lovely 6-wheeled things, and that's the Mid-Norfolk Railway. They're there practicing on. There's another mention of it there. There we go, that's my railway. Leading on from the military, and we used to have a military liaison officer in the ambulance service. We've now tried to widen that. They're called NILOs, National Interagency Liaison Officer, stroke TAC Advisor. Fire service, it's a NILO. You own the course, bless you. I hope that becomes a multi-agency course. And that person will be the link from the military and the free services. That course is essential. That's what I said about the safety officer course. The NILO course works. You've got an expert, and if they don't know the answer to that, they'll know somebody else in another service that will do, can act. We have had colleagues who, although they're dressed in green, have acted on behalf of the police in certain CT operations. Now that the CBRN Centre comes under West Midlands Police, that's even more prevalent. So you could a police, fire, or an ambulance officer can react to that. I mentioned about risk assessment. That's what we've instilled in the new JESIP revised doctrine. We were going to call Eric PD, but apparently the Health and Safety Executive have got rid of Eric PD now. They now call it a hierarchy of control, but it's the same after all that. But basic risk assessment. And again, yeah, that looks great on paper, but it's actually the 3 commanders getting actually what are the risks here? What is our plan? And getting together and knowing each other's limitations and actually knowing what the common goal is. Just go back to London, just some things that have changed following 7/7. Casualty triage, that's what Her Majesty's Coroner said about triage. And I'll talk about the communication one in a minute. Triage, we changed following that. What did I say with a major loss of life? Simple procedure, a tourniquet. Yeah, hemostatic dressing. Plug the leak in basic English. That can save lives. Yes, that wasn't happening. If you read the card, you didn't do that. So that's changed. And the other big change, so the onus is not on just one person. If at all possible, triage is carried out. I haven't put it on that slide, but it says it on the card. Triage is carried out in a pair. So one person will do the basic obs, the other person is going to record that. That is really important when we come into the deceased as well. So if you have the airway's not open, they're not breathing, and they are dead, that's important. We record position, time, and as a state registered paramedic, that would be me that would be pronouncing the death. That's done directly on the card. And it also says about a position now, which we learned from there. And the coroner, we've worked with the industry that produces those cards so that's on there now. So if we had to move the body because of a live person underneath, again, you boys are happier. Okay, so that, again, I think that's a major step forward. Who are the best people at doing triage? You're right, that's not paramedics. because we'll think too much and we want to do too much for that one person. Remember, in a major incident, what have we got to do? We're doing the most for the most. And what tends to happen, if you look, and I think we've learned from the military on this, you tend to over-triage, particularly children. They'll jump up one triage. So the best people, I'll be honest, to triage are my colleagues in red, but I wouldn't ever tell him that, because they'll just read the card. Triage now is undertaken at various stages of paramedic training now, so that has changed again since 7/7 across the country because of that Rule 43. They're not called Rule 43s now, but it was at the time. So just to reassure you on that. There is a separate CBRN one, which our hazardous area teams will do for CBRN. The other thing I think that we've changed, relating to that second comment about communication, position was there was evidence of lack of communication to incident commanders on the surface and those in tunnel, lack of proper contact. Something we looked at when in the revision of JESIP, and I suggested let's get a briefing tool in there. We've got everybody doing methane, which is the first thing. Fantastic. We know the cavalry's on its way. You've called for backup. Wonderful. On the same system. What about giving a briefing? There was all sorts of different ways of doing it. So, well, certainly as of last week when we went through the reviews, the comments about IMARC are pretty favourable, and I think we're going to go for it. So IMARC, the first bit is a methane. It's just repeating now or amending it, and you can read the rest of it. But I think IMARC we're going to get used to using as a briefing tool. So that will help not only in agency, but inter-agency as well. The other thing I think that's changed, there's a plug. And my dear friend there as well, who happens to fly that one. HEMS. Every area of the UK has got HEMS now. If we look back to 7/7, what was HEMS used for then? On 7/7. Go on, Philip. It was used for carrying equipment and people. Yeah? So HEMS has evolved greatly in the 11 years since 7/7. But one, the training has gone up. Two, the response times have gone up. And 24 hours, I'm very proud of my two in East Anglia, now can fly virtually 24 hours. They've got night flying capability. And if that's grounded, they've got a lovely Beamer that they can have, which he's not allowed to drive, by the way. But so HEMS assets improved greatly. Of course, in London, do you need HEMS if God forbid, a 7/7 happened again? Probably road transport is equally adequate. So I would think if it did happen again, HEMS would be used to remove casualties to definitive trauma units. I would suggest, primarily though, getting people there. Certainly forget it says ambulance, you can use it to use personnel such as specialist firefighters, my team as well, which leads on to that one. The Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy, of course, lost after many years fantastic service, and I've called them. We had a particularly nasty incident up in Cromer. There's another mention. The running time from the base, because of the government wanting it near an airport, our heart base, would have been an hour plus. Phone the Royal Air Force. Can you help us? This is life and limb. We've got an entrapment. Yeah, meet me at Duxford. And the boys and girls assembled on a Sea King were there instantly. Fantastic. Same thing will be the same with Her Majesty's Coast Guard. But I'll be running a workshop with Her Majesty's Coast Guard probably in September, looking at some of the intricacies and a bit of a changeover that is happening. But certainly, and there are one or two problems. I'm not saying it's all wonderful, but certainly bigger aircraft, faster, and we can still use them for life and limb. And at the moment, it's still, RAF chaps, it's still up Kinloss at the moment, the number, isn't it? It's down at Fareham. Number's the same, but it will be changing. With all this going on, that's still happening. We're still, in my perspective, we've still got Mrs. Jones having a stroke, and we've still got people phoning 999. I think what we really need, by the way, the ambulance service needs a doctor's strike every day, because the call volume across England went down 10%. Every ambulance service, bar one, the call volume went down by 10%. You can imagine why the Department of Health aren't saying we should have a strike, but hopefully we resolve this dispute and we could then say to people, actually, it proves you don't need an ambulance. I'll leave you with that one. Business continuity, it is unsustainable. Fire service calls have gone down 50% in 10 years. The ambulance service calls are going up 22% each year. The final bit really is about debriefing. Are we actually learning? Well, I think in some of those things I've shown you there, we are. We've changed practice. We have definitely changed practice. Communications are improved. We have a better platform for that. The triage is improved. Getting people there, the skills of people to get them into those places is improved. The way we actually do the debrief is also changed. The crew room, ambulance service staff never get back to the crew room. They're out on the next job. Same with police officers as well. So there needs to be a way of doing that, capturing those lessons, and as quickly as possible. But then it's already well capturing. It's actually sharing those. And of course, the government have a wonderful system, Resilience Direct, which has a joint organisational learning system, which we got to use. And the ambulance service have something called LID, Lessons Identified Debriefing. My boss has now sent a very snotogram to every ambulance chief exec saying, we've signed up to the system, it's been legally reviewed, use it. And if you know Mark Scoggins, he also helped to sign the letter as well. So we've got to do it. And then there'll be things that come out of that which we can share with you, which need to go on that joint organisational learning. So that we don't come back to things. Communication 1987. Was identified, wasn't it, in the King's Cross fire. 7-7, same again. The next one, we don't want communication and lack of treatment to casualties being the same things again. And there are areas you can look at, I would hope, interoperability. Oh, it wasn't a Jessup incident, we're not using that, but it was multi-agency working evident. We weren't working in silo. Yes, you're going to have to work in organisationals, but I would hope we are strapped to each other at that operational level, those commanders. The role of the media, we can never be proactive, but we need to be more reactive to that. And the way actually we're communicating with the public. Helen and I were talking about it earlier about ways that we can reach people. So, but that whole debrief process is so important. Finally, reassuringly, these things do occur infrequently. But the damage and the loss to infrastructure and UK PLC is unbelievable, really. They have a high potential for litigation, as we know, with certain events, and I haven't mentioned an event of the 15th of April, have I? But public inquiries, yeah. Rod Mackenzie, who was a registrar at the time of 7-7, said that was one of the worst experiences ever, but he'd done some notes. As a doctor on 7-7, he's now a consultant at Adam Brooks. He said that notebook saved his bacon when he was at the public inquiry, the coroner's inquiry for 7-7. So note-taking, absolutely essential. We send loggers to scene now. And part of the Jessup review, we've asked you, do you want a joint organisational log? The answer was a resounding yes. Flute, of course, put forward the NARU log that he's devised, and that seems to have come out well. Brownie point there for Norfolk. Horizon scanning, yes, all terrorism, I mentioned that already, but that's my big thing as a health officer. That's coming back, that will bite us. We were very, very lucky with piggy sniffles, and I say that flippantly. It did kill people, but not as many as we were predicting if it had been from avian or that. It was a nasty strain, but nowhere near as bad as we were thinking. So we are still overdue an influenza outbreak. Sorry, yep. I would go for the 2.5. Yeah, because 0.5 we can cope with. We've done that. I mean, I can't remember the figures. I should know this for piggy sniffles, but higher. Definitely. Yeah. Sustained threat to the UK. As we know, the terrorism threat re Northern Ireland has been raised today. So there is that. There's my doom scale. Are we at the... Don't panic, Mr. Mannering, or are we at the we're doomed? I'm not sure where we are. And of course, you speak to various people, and we say we're at number 10 of severe, or number 9 of severe, and they're starting to put that. I won't get it. I won't comment about that. Obviously, I'll leave you with that. Oh, and there's one more mention of Norfolk. There we go. And, there's another one. There we go. That's Dereham, which is my local railway. And me behind the Battle of Britain class. Any questions? Sir?